This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at a couple Pilot pins that I picked up recently on two separate eBay auctions. They are both the Pilot Grance, and I believe this is the newer of the two. It has a style of clip that is similar but not exactly the same as my Pilot Stargazer, and my Pilot Legno has the same style of clip. You can see down here at the end the Stargazer is a little pointier and there's nothing labeled on the Stargazer clip. The Grance has Grance stamped in there, and the Grance clip is a little bit longer. You can see it's similar in styling to the Grance and the Stargazer are similar. They have different types of cap bands. They are both snap caps, and I'll show that in just a minute. I want to go ahead and show the older of the two. What I believe is the older of the two has a ball clip. There's nothing labeled on the clip, and it's similar in style but not exactly the same as the clip on the Custom 74. The Custom 74 does say Pilot up at the top. And the only other difference between these two is the older one says Pilot on the front, and then on the back it says Japan, and then what I think is the newer one says Pilot Japan on the back. And if you look on eBay, the Pilot Grance comes in lots of different finishes. They all, to my knowledge, they're all metal pins. They've got a nice weight to them. In fact, it feels like about the same weight as the Stargazer or the Stella. The Pilot Stella is the same type of pin. But I believe the Grance was never officially distributed in the United States. You could find them at Jet Pens for quite a while, but the ones that were available at Jet Pens had gold trim and a gold colored 14 karat gold nib. Both of these have 14 karat gold nibs. You can find lots of them on eBay that have steel nibs, and there's not very much of a price difference between the steel nib version and the gold nib version, so you kind of have to watch out for that when you're shopping. The Grance has a snap cap, and I've mentioned in an earlier video, snapping it off feels like it requires less force than actually snapping it back on. You can see there's a little cap ring with some little nubs there that I assume has to do with snapping it back on. And I'm going to do the writing samples first because, as usual, whenever I do writing samples, I dip the nibs in ink. I'm using Waterman Mysterious Blue in both pens right now, and I've been dipping them and writing with them and going back and re-dipping them and writing some more over several days now, so I want to go ahead and do that before I open up the pens and start showing the different features. The newer one has a 14 karat fine nib. I've read somewhere that this is a number 3 size nib, similar to the nib, the same size nib that's in the Stargazer and Legno, but it's not labeled on this nib, so I'm not 100% sure. I've disassembled, pulled the nib on both pens. They use the same feed, but I haven't tried swapping the nibs yet. And again, I'm using Waterman Mysterious Blue. This nib doesn't feel quite as smooth as the fine nib on my Custom 74. It puts down a similar line, and I I think I'm going to have to compare them side by side. I'll probably have to do that in another video. But this nib doesn't feel like it has quite as much bounce. And that would make sense to me. This is a shorter nib. It's got shorter tines. So I can see where it might have less flexibility. So I think it's a number 3. And I wouldn't call this nib smooth. I would say this one is more, it feels more sailor-like. There's a tiny bit of feedback. And I can hear it on the page. And maybe that's more, maybe it's more that I'm just hearing the feedback, because yeah, it feels the same in each direction. And it's got that typical, the upstrokes are drier than the down and side strokes. And that gives your writing a little bit of natural line variation. But I'm very fond of these fine nibs, especially when I'm writing in these little small squares. I've always been a fan of Pilot fine nibs. And I do like this one. Next, I've got I guess this one was labeled when I bought it, a gray marbled finish, but it almost looks like in the lighter areas that it has a little bit of a tan. It's a warm gray finish, and when I first unboxed it, I inked it up with Mont Blanc Swan Illusion, which is a very pale brown ink, and it paired nicely. There was a little bit of a hard start there, and I think that's because I'm just dipping these. I haven't had any issues with it when I had it inked up with a converter in place. I really enjoy writing with these Pilot medium nibs, but I prefer writing on rhodia paper just because the rhodia paper I have has 5mm grids instead of these like 3.7, so it's much more comfortable. When I write on these grids, I tend to take up 2 lines. I'm still hearing the feedback, but just by the nature of the size of the tipping on this medium nib, it does feel a little smoother. This is still a number 3 size nib, I think. Again, it's not labeled. These Grance nibs have beautiful scroll work on them. I've never seen this design on any other Pilot nibs. I don't know if they do that, but it's got the medium down there at the bottom real small, and it's got the 14 karat gold 585 and Pilot above that, and I believe that's a G there. Just a very pretty nib, but it doesn't say number 3 on it like the Stargazer does. This one is, I feel comfortable saying that it is smooth, especially on this Tomoe River paper. I just enjoy writing with these very much. It looks like this nib is a little bit drier than the fine nib, and it may just be, let me make a smaller X. I don't know, maybe it is actually a little drier. And this is so smooth. Maybe this nib does have a touch of baby's bottom, because I had a hard start up here and then a little bit of a hard start here. And a lot of times when I'm doing writing samples with these, the downstroke on the P on Pilot, the top half hard starts and then it catches the paper down here at the bottom. I didn't do it there. But I really love the feel of these pens in the hand. Like I mentioned, they're metal pens, plastic section. When I first opened this, I was pleased with the weight of the pen because I knew I wouldn't have to put a Con 70 in it. In my Custom Heritage 91, I had to put a Con 70 in it just to make the balance of the pen feel right. Unlike most people, I don't mind the Con 40. It's a smaller ink capacity, and especially on a fine nib like this is plenty of ink. I'm, really eager to change inks by the time I use up the ink in a converter this size. But just before I started filming this video, I thought I would see if the Con 70 fit, and this little ledge here is too wide to fit into this narrow metal section. And even if that did fit, the pen doesn't fit over the back. So you will have to use a Con 70 or a Con 50. I don't know if these came with converters. A lot of times when you buy pens from Japan, they come with the ink cartridge, but you have to buy the converters separately. And I bought both of these used, and they didn't come with converters. But I've got plenty of these Con 50s laying around. And I like that it has a little rubber O-ring here. That way when you're screwing the metal part of the section into the metal pen, you get to an area where you have some resistance, and it just keeps it from inadvertently coming loose. There's not a lot of information out there about the Pilot Grance. I saw some reviews dating back to 2015 from like the Well-Appointed Desk and the Pen Addict, and there was another review from someone that I wasn't formally familiar with, and the Pilot Grance got good reviews from all of them. The only criticism of it is that it's such a narrow pen, but for a small hand like me, or for someone who likes narrow pens, that's not an issue. There are very few video reviews of the Pilot Grance on YouTube. One of them I recall seeing was from a young man whose mother had brought him one back from Japan, and it was a marbled finish, and I can't remember if I think it was a marble blue finish. Could have been a marble red, but I've seen the marble finish in lots of different colors. In fact, one of them that I bid on was a marble green, but I've seen marble blue, marble red, and I've also seen, I don't know, I can't remember. There's another pattern that's kind of like the marble finish. It's a similar style, but there's like a pattern to it, whereas the marble is like random swirls and there's a randomness to it. But and there were also special editions. I think each year, I don't know if they still do it, but each year for a while there would be a different color or a different style. The two different clip designs, fortunately, I like both of them. I can't say I've tried to decide, well, which one is my favorite. I like both of them. I can't remember if I mentioned that the Grance wasn't officially distributed in the US, but JetPens did import some, and they came in 3 colors. I think they were all like a pearly material, kind of like this one. There was a white one, a pale blue, and a pale pink. And I think the pale blue was brighter or a darker blue than this one. This one almost looks silver, but it was advertised as a pale blue, and I can kind of see that it's just barely blue, but I like this better than the pale blue one that JetPens was selling. I like that it's almost a silver color or a gray color. But the ones JetPens were selling all had gold trim and hardware, and I originally got interested in the Grance because I had heard it had a number 3 size nib, and at the time I only had my Stargazer with a medium nib, and I thought, oh, if I could get another pen that has a fine nib, I could switch nibs between the two. But before that, I did find the Legno. It has a fine nib. This has a medium, so if I ever want to, I can switch nibs in these two. And I went ahead and I got the medium nib pen first, and then I'm very fond of fine nibs, so I had to find one with a fine nib. But I would recommend, if you are shopping for one on eBay, be patient. I lost several auctions when I was shopping for these two. One of them was a pale green. It was so pretty, but I actually won the auction, but the seller canceled the transaction. There was some issue, they said. The pen didn't write, or there was something with the pen and they canceled it. But I was fortunate that I was able to get each of these for less than $90, including shipping. So I would recommend, don't overpay for them. I think a lot of these are going for between $100 and $120 if you just want to buy one using the Buy It Now feature. But if you're patient and you watch the auctions, you can get some pretty good deals. I believe I paid $85 for this one. That includes shipping. And this one, I believe I paid $65. So just be patient. Now this one, I will say, these pens do post deeply. This one doesn't post as well. I guess it stays on there pretty good, but it doesn't post as tightly as the older one. Yeah, it holds onto the barrel a little bit tighter. Now, it has a capping mechanism that is, you start feeling some resistance here, and then it snaps. That's similar to the Prera that gets lots of compliments on its satisfying click, but these are not quite as satisfying as the Prera. With the Prera, you get quite a bit more resistance before it actually clicks. But now that I have a number of pens with snap caps, I'm getting kind of spoiled by them. You know, the quick, it doesn't seem like that much of a thing till you're actually using it. The section, let me see how it compares. You see it's a bit longer, but slightly more narrow than the Custom 74, and you can see how much difference there is in the size of the nibs. Like I mentioned before, the Custom 74 number 5 size nib does feel a bit bouncier than the number 3 size nibs, but there is a little, you can slightly notice the bounciness or the softness of the nibs. I wouldn't try to squeeze any line variation out of this. Just your natural, the weight of your hand writing will tend to squeeze out a little more ink and give you just a hint of line variation, maybe some shading in your writing. I believe that's it. I'm pretty fond of the flat ends. I've gotten to where I really like that in these Pilot pens. I like the contrasting, the black finial and end of the pen. And I like the amount of taper you get in tight pen loops, especially like the little Leuchtturm pen loops. I'm able to easily fit this in there. It's a pretty tight pen loop, but with this being a narrow pen and it coming to a kind of a narrow taper down at the end, I'm pretty fond of these. I believe the Stargazer is still my favorite. I'm a real fan of the cap band. I like the look of it. It doesn't post as deeply as the Grance, but it does post pretty securely, and with it being a shorter pen, I like that. And it does have a similar capping mechanism and feel to the Prera. It's maybe even a little bit nicer than the Prera because that metal, that loud metal snap. But I am glad that I picked these up. I do enjoy writing with them. And I'm probably going to do another writing sample at some time in the future comparing how it feels to write with the number 3 compared to the number 5 size nibs. I'm going to do a quick test of the reverse writing. That's become something that I'm increasingly interested in. Okay, that was regular, and this is reverse. It goes from a medium to, I believe this is on par with my Pilot Extra Fine. The Extra Fine 78G with the steel nib that I have. But that was actually pretty smooth. It was enjoyable to write with. Okay, next I'll do the fine nib. Yeah, that is quite a bit wetter. And now the reverse. Again, this time it goes from a fine to extra fine again. Again, it's pretty smooth for an extra fine. Yeah, that's pretty handy. Alright, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.